Good?
Okay. Microphone's working okay?
Yep.
Good. Welcome everyone. My name is Don Angelaccio. I'm the superintendent here in Prospect Heights District 23. Thank you very much for coming out or for watching online. Our goal in these events is to share information with our community to be as transparent throughout this process. And so your participation, your involvement as informed citizens is absolutely what we were going for. So thank you very much for being here. Our agenda tonight is, I'm going to try to go through the information, but I really want to spend the bulk of our time in the questions and conversations. Because the information you'll be able to read, and you've seen some of it in the letters, but I really want to hear from you, from your perspectives, and I'd also like to have the opportunity to kind of have that dialogue. So we'll share a little bit of background about District 23 for those that are perhaps not as familiar with it. We'll talk about our process of identifying needs and priorities over the last number of years. We'll share some of the existing concerns and conditions as well as our proposed solutions. We will talk plainly about the finance and the funding for this project. We'll talk about the next steps in terms of both the informational campaign as well as the board. Open it up for question and conversation. So again, thanks everyone for being here tonight. For those of you that have not been a part of District 23 or not been a part of District 23 in a while, we have so many things to be really proud of and excited about in our schools. Our schools have been and continue to be a vibrant learning environment. We continue to serve the needs of our students to the very best of our abilities. We range in grades pre-K, 3 and 4 year olds, up through 8th grade, 14, 15 year olds. You may be aware that the district went through a transformation a number of years ago, about 12 years ago now, to grade level centers. So we still have 4 attendance schools. Eisenhower Elementary, pre-K to 1, is located on Schoenbeck and Camp McDonald. Betsy Ross is at the end of this campus, on the south end of this campus, serving grades 2 and 3. We're in Sullivan School, which serves grades 4 and 5. And across the parking lot is MacArthur Middle School, serving grades 6 through 8. 1865 is actually when the district was founded by a local group of farmers who wanted to bring their community together and establish roots in a community centered around school. And that trend of the community coming together to support their schools is still in place in District 23 today. One of the components of our crazy Illinois configurations is that school districts don't only serve one particular population as they do in other states. So even though we're named Prospect Heights District 23, we actually serve a small sliver of Mount Prospect, about a third of our students from Wheeling, a third of our students from Arlington Heights, and a third of our students from Prospect Heights. And that's important when we talk about residents being aware of their schools, the services and the programs and facilities that they support with their tax dollars, because oftentimes they go, oh, I'm in Wheeling, that's a different district than this one. We say, no, 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 you're part of ours, you're part of our district. And so we serve all 4 of those different communities, about 1,500 students, we're just under that right now, approximately 235 staff, represented by our Prospect Heights Education Association and the SEIU, which supports our custodial services. And as we started this process, this is my 11th year in the district, 6th as superintendent. The theme that we have again heard echoed back time and time again is that community connection to their schools, that they felt positively about their school experience, and to the extent that we continue now, especially post-COVID, to reconnect with families, those partnerships are and have been a historical hallmark of District 23. So we're in the 5th year of a 5-year strategic plan. That's a guiding document that we use as the school leaders to identify concerns, needs, supports, programs and sort of plan that out over a number of years. The needs and priorities that are currently on our plan, many of them were identified through our strategic plan process. We had focus groups and surveys of the community and parents and students and staff to generate sort of where's that gap between what we're currently providing and what the community deserves, feels they need, the services or programs that we're not able to provide just yet. And out of that came these four priorities, certainly in no particular order, because they're all important to us as an educational institution. But when we think about one of the biggest gaps, one of the things that we're not providing that is in demand in our community is full-day kindergarten and early childhood services for all students. We'll share a little bit later about our process of serving students. We serve many of our kindergarten students, but not all of them, and we serve about half of our early childhood eligible students. Safety and security, unfortunately, has continued to be at our forefront. Turn around every other day, it seems as if there's some tragedy that we need to be mindful of, both in terms of prevention as well as being prepared for response. So we've got some enhancements that were identified in terms of the facilities as well as some of our programming. Repairing and maintaining our facilities, just like you all do with your home. You have a long to-do list. It never quite seems like you can get through everything on that to-do list. So we have to continue to prioritize, use the monies that are available to us to continue to repair and maintain those facilities. But there comes a time, just as it does in your home, where the Band-Aid fixes, the short-term solutions just aren't enough. And so part of our need that we've identified are some long-standing repairs that are necessary that'll help move us forward. And lastly, one of the things that we heard in our community forums where we were gathering information was the importance of the schools not being shuttered at the end of the school day, but rather that these are seen as facilities that serve the needs of our community, even outside of school. And so if you've ever driven past on a Sunday morning, you'll see that MacArthur is currently used by a group that rents that facility for religious reasons. On Saturday, Betsy Ross and MacArthur is used by two different Polish schools, so the parking lot is busy all day Saturday. We have relationships with both Prospect Heights and Arlington Heights Park District, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, clubs, etc. And so part of what we heard was, whatever you're thinking about doing, don't forget that you serve the broader community. So we've got some elements of need here that we want to make sure that the facilities that we are providing for our community are used throughout the entirety of the day and the entirety of the calendar, not just 8 till 3 when students are in session. So the first and primary issue that we talk about in terms of instruction and programming is our focus on early learning. This district, again, I came in 11 years ago. They had, for the past 10 years, so 20 plus years, been discussing the need for full-day kindergarten. In 2008, they had a study done and they made some movement toward full-day K. They developed a program for our bilingual Spanish-speaking students in kindergarten, as well as one section of at-risk students. And that was a move toward a more comprehensive full-day experience. But it's been stuck in that position since 2008 till now for a wide range of reasons, but certainly, as you'll see here and as you can probably imagine, it's space, funding, and operations. So why early learning? Why is it important for our students to have these experiences? Well, we know that for all students, an earlier foundation in instruction helps prepare them for their next steps on the educational journey. It's particularly helpful for students who are at risk or who have special needs, but all students benefit from that additional time. Currently, we have the entire kindergarten standards that we teach in a 2.5-hour block. we're not looking to expand that set of curriculum, but rather use that time differently throughout a full day experience that would allow us to actually go in more depth, provide more individualization, to reteach some items, and certainly to be able just to breathe and enjoy being in school. Right now, that half-day period, when the kids come in off the buses and they take off their boots and jackets and hang them up and they get ready for the day, it's almost like a blink, and then they're putting their boots back on and jackets back on, and they're getting back out on the buses. So we really like to have the ability for them to feel engaged in their school in a different way. We have identified approximately 35% of students who will eventually come to us. So our enrollment figures, once we get into first and second grade, become pretty stable. And then that group, that cohort of students, stays with us typically through 8th grade. But in this kindergarten, or early childhood and kindergarten window, there are a number of reasons why we don't see the same number of students who will be here in first grade. And oftentimes we hear that's because it's not a full day option, so parents may select to go elsewhere. But it's also in terms of our space and capacity for our early childhood programming, for the services that we're able to offer with limited classrooms and limited teachers, we have to put a cap on the total enrollment. And so one of our most significant needs here is reaching out to and identifying all those residents who pay their taxes and want to send their kids to our schools would have the ability to do so. Currently, not all of them do. I heard some conversation earlier too. It is true, District 214 feeder districts are all in the process and have been in the process of transitioning to full day kindergarten. District 25 just passed a referendum. District 15 has a referendum in November. Those pass, we would be the last feeder district not to provide that as a service. And while we may have thought about full day kindergarten as a nice thing to have or a special thing to have, it's become more the norm especially in the northern portions of Cook County and in Illinois. And so part of that competitive market in terms of resale and attracting home values is to stay competitive with our neighbors, so that if families are looking to move into our district and they ask that question, as they do to Dr. Lombados on every tour that he gives, is kindergarten full day or half day? And he says half day. Then those families have a choice. They may choose to stay with us because they will see the benefit of being a part of District 23 later on, but we certainly know that that's a deciding factor for many families. When we talk about safety and security, we talk about a wide range of items. We're not only talking about the physical plant. Certainly that's one of the most significant things we can do. Make sure that our doors lock, make sure that our windows lock, make sure that our facility is secure, that we have cameras covering entrances, exits, play areas. But we also want to talk about the way in which we interact on campus to help improve that safety. This last year, we reconfigured all of the traffic flow on this campus for morning pickup and drop-off. I actually heard from our buddy Bob, our crossing guard, that we went back to the way they used to do pickup and drop-off in the 1980s and early 90s. He said, yeah, it all comes back around eventually. That's how they used to do it, because it made more sense and lo and behold, we thought we came up with some great new idea, and Bob said, no, that's the way we used to do it in 1989. I was like, all right, well, I'm glad we rediscovered it. But we were able to reconfigure that traffic flow to help cars get off of Schoenbeck Road so they weren't backing up, causing some accidents, putting some cars at risk. So we think about safety and security through that lens as well. We're looking at some traffic flow at Eisenhower, looking at some different parking options, as well as a bus loop and a car loop that would help to make entrance and exit from the school safer as well. Again, facilities, one of the most important investments that a community makes in its school districts, its people, and facilities. And so from the facility standpoint, these buildings have had their interiors improved over the last 15 years. We have continued to look at improvements to the exterior of buildings over the most recent 5 to 7 years, and planning forward as well. But there are some components of that plan, like I said, that to-do list like you have at home, that are just too big to tackle in one summer, too big to tackle in the current existing budget, but there continue to be needs that we need to address at some point. And those are particularly at Eisenhower, some overcrowding issues, again, in terms of space and capacity. But we're also looking at the siding, the doors, the windows at this campus, these 3 schools, which are at least 25 years old. We don't can't find the initial purchase and install. The earliest records we have about 25 years ago are referenced as repair the siding, repair the doors, not the actual installs. Of course, that gives us the ability to do a couple of things. It allows us to update the look of the building so that the outside is as vibrant as the inside of the schools. But on a more practical level, it allows us to improve our energy efficiency, our security, as well as just the functioning of doors and windows that currently are in disrepair. Like every referendum you've ever seen, we've got our share of look at these bad pictures. And those are things that are real, that we have fixed. We put that Band-Aid on it, but we know that the longer solution, the more comprehensive solution is, of course, more costly. And again, when we talk about our community, that need came up in terms of interior and exterior play areas, recreational areas, meeting areas, both for rental to partners as well as our intergovernmental agreements with Prospect Heights, Park District, Arlington Heights Park District, the fire, police. They'll do trainings in our schools. We let them do their testing here, those types of things. That we want to be seen as a resource to the community beyond the school day. So here come the pictures. We'll show you some of these. When we've worked with our partners in pulling the presentation together, they said, can you find a picture of the wood exterior deteriorating? I said, yes. They said, which building? I said, all of them. If you walk down Schoenbeck Road, I think we're a stop for the birds from Capistrano. I think they stop here and they build their houses in the siding, because every time we gently evacuate one and we fill that hole, they seem to find another. And again, that's not through lack of upkeep, it's just simply the age of those facilities. And so what we're looking at in terms of a potential solution to that is replacing exterior siding, doors, windows, using a more sturdy, durable fabric equipment. No, what's the right word?
It's a cement.
Cement.
A cement fiberboard.
Fiberboard is what it's called. Nichia is what it's called. I don't pick out the colors. My wife doesn't let me do that. She said, what color do you want this to be? I'll make it that color. So that's not my wife, by the way. That's my work wife, one of my work wives, but that's, yeah. So this is a picture of Betsy Ross. Again, we're looking at replacing existing doors, windows, siding with siding, windows, doors as they exist, not altering the design or layout. We have a picture of Ann Sullivan as well. I think the one thing that we've talked about for this is that the main entrance at Eisenhower doesn't stand out as much as the entrance at Eisenhower, the entrance at Ross, and of course MacArthur. Those of you who found this today, it's just, oh, here's the door, right? And so there's nothing really that calls out to the community, this is the main entrance, enter here. So that helps us with safety because it funnels people to the correct entryway and they're not trying to go in other doors. So that's one other component in addition to the replacement. MacArthur, also windows, doors, siding. We're pretty happy with the current entryway. And these are just renderings right now. We've not gone into depth on too much detail in the design phase, where that would be getting out, sort of putting the cart before the horse. But we've got some ideas about the facility upgrades as an investment for the next 25 years. We've talked about safety and security again through some different lenses, but on a very practical level, your doors need to shut and lock when you come in. You don't always want to be pulling that door closed because it gets caught on the cement. We have some cameras in the district. I won't tell you exactly how many, but we need more. We don't have full coverage currently. And so those types of things, replacing doors, windows, siding, our keyless entry system, will help us to track and monitor safety and security through a different lens as well. So replacing all of those helps us to meet that goal. At Eisenhower, when we talk about the facilities, this is the current layout of Eisenhower School. And the main entrance is here. And again, we've talked about the shortage of space, our inability to serve potential students, but we also have some current overcrowding relative to our library space being used really in 3 sections. We have our full library that was cut. Part of it now is a reading intervention area, and the other part of it is for some office space as well as some storage. That's not the ideal purpose of that space. We'd love to return it to its full goal of being an interactive learning space. We've got a number of offices that are shared, which isn't a unique problem to Eisenhower, but it's uniquely bad at Eisenhower. And so that's a goal for us. Looking as we expand, we want to make sure that we expand enough for room for those services to be provided in an appropriate space. And currently the multi-purpose room is at its full capacity, so adding any more students who would be there for lunch would require us to have an additional space for lunch, for PE, so our solution will address that. What we're looking at specifically for Eisenhower, the plan that we're proposing includes support for all 4 of our facilities. But specifically at Eisenhower, here again is the existing layout of the building, would be to add an 8 classroom addition, renovate the library, and include a multi-purpose room that would allow us to expand to provide those services to all of our students, would give us a little bit of room for the therapists and the other reading intervention and math intervention service providers to have some space, as well as for us to return the library to its original purpose. In its design, each of the classrooms are paired together in sort of a modular way, so we'd be looking at these spaces being used for early childhood classrooms. They would share, they would have a common restroom between them so that we're kind of realizing some cost savings instead of putting restrooms in every space, as well as a shared office space between the 2 classrooms that allows our teachers and instructional assistants to support one another, interact, etc. But then each space would have their own private dedicated individual workspace, large group learning spaces, as well as cubbies for jackets and boots and things like that, which are currently stored out in the hallway. We talked a little bit again, the Eisenhower addition would result in a new entryway. We'd be moving that to the new end of the parking lot so that it would be on the opposite side. It's currently here. We'd be moving it here. That would allow us to screen guests, visitors, parents as they enter the building. We're currently doing that in our vestibule. This would give us an enhanced space for that to occur. And then, as I mentioned before about the traffic patterns, you'll see here in the drawing on the right, there are 2 expanded parking lots. The one on the left would be identified for staff parking, as well as the bus turnaround. We'd be able to put all of our buses on one side, and then the second parking lot would be for parent pickup drop-off, and there'd be a safe parking loop for a pickup loop for parents driving vehicles. If you've been past Eisenhower at arrival dismissal, you can visibly see that that's not always as clearly defined. And that's an area of growth for us that we continue to try to improve on a day-to-day basis, but this gives us one solution for that as well. In terms of community enhancements, currently at Eisenhower, there's a baseball field here that's used by many of our community residents. It's a T-ball field. We'd be looking at moving that field out into the grass area, as well as adding another playground area for early childhood. They'd be age appropriate and ability appropriate for our earliest learners. And this again is just a graphic of an example of one of the multi-purpose rooms. We'd be looking at building something that's the same size as our existing multi-purpose room, but it would allow us then outside of school hours to have that space as well as the outdoor play areas available to the community. So what's it going to cost? We recognize, I'm so glad that you asked that question about who scheduled the mailing to go out the same day as the tax bills. I said, how lucky are we that got, that is an unfortunate just circumstance of timing from the county delaying and delaying and delaying their tax bills and us trying to schedule out. But at the end of the day, it doesn't bother us because our goal throughout this process has been to be transparent and upfront about this information. We're glad that folks have questions and concerns. We're certainly respectful and aware of those. We want to help spread the information about what we believe is a solution. We understand that not everyone will see it that way. But one of the things that's potentially different about District 23 than maybe other districts you may be familiar with is that we are particularly dependent upon local property tax. Some of our neighboring districts have industry, corporate areas that help support or offset some of the burden for local property taxpayers. For us, almost 84% of our revenue comes from our taxpayers. So we know that any decision that requires additional funding is going to need to be something that we seek support from our community for. When we think about, the next slide shows fund balance. Oh, I'm sorry, expenditures. So what do we do with that money that comes in? 96.4% of it gets turned right back around to education. We're spending it on instruction and support services, and that's an important graphic, not because you may say, oh, well, that's what schools are supposed to spend their money on, is turn right back around onto instruction. But part of the challenge when we talk about having a very, very lean budget, trimming down, we have gone through a number of iterations of budget deficit reductions in the past, and the trimming fat off the bone has all been trimmed, and we're not in a position currently where we're able to sock money away for a rainy day, where we're able to accumulate monies to make a major purchase or expenditure. So the monies that we're receiving, we're being as responsible as we can to turn that right back around into the classrooms. But at some point, again, when we look at fund balance on the next slide, we know that we don't have a large savings in the bank to turn to. So the state sets a benchmark at 30% of your fund balance. Our board has echoed that with a board policy that says our target is 33% fund balances. And from 2016 through 2020, which is the last audited fiscal year that we have final results in for, you'll see that we are right around that 30 to 35% range, which helps us to meet our goal of having those funds in the bank for the rainy days when tax bills are 6 to 8 months late, like we're experiencing now. But when you look at other neighboring districts, that doesn't have exactly the same picture. You'll see that Prospect Heights has the lowest fund balance, which is why we're not able to contribute as much toward a major purchase as some of our neighboring districts. And again, this is typically pretty aligned with corporate and industry and those other types of communities that are receiving income but don't generate students to serve. So they're generating revenue without the corresponding expenditure, so there's more money in the bank, so to speak, that they can sock away for a major purchase. When we talk about tax rate, nobody likes tax rates, believe me, myself included, and we all know that they are very high. Well, part of the reason, again, that we feel that they're very high in District 23 is because of the high reliance upon residential property to pick up that tab. When we look at some of the more industry or corporate connected districts, District 59, District 25, their rates are perhaps a little bit lower because the funding is generated elsewhere. But even given that, our rate at 3.416 is the third lowest in the area. That doesn't make it any easier to pay our taxes, but it just gives us a comparison for some of the other neighboring districts. So to complete the project, there's really two components. First, we're going to talk about the budget for the expansion at Eisenhower, the renovation at Eisenhower, the facility repairs, maintenance, and some of the security purchases. That comes out to about $24 million is our current projected budget. That's projected both with escalators for costs and potential inflation over the next few years. But we know that so we've got some of that conservative budgeting built into the process. We're looking at a $20 million debt certificate, borrowing funds with taxpayer approval, as well as $4 million contributed directly from the district. That's some of the money that we have been saving to turn around and use for a major project like this. The second component of the funding is the annual operations. Because if we build it, but we don't have money to pay for teachers, then it's a nice building that's empty. And if we pay for the teachers, but we don't build it, we have nowhere for those kids to come to school or for folks to go to work. And so we've budgeted, again, looking, sort of projecting out increase in enrollment, increase in staffing, everything from custodians to instructional assistants to classroom teachers, as well as materials, facilities, electric bills, etc. We've sort of projected all of those costs out over the next number of years and are looking at a 1.2 annual addition to the budget. So, as all tax referendums are, they're pretty wordy and overly complicated when they look in their formal final state. Well, we're trying to consolidate that down to make it as easy for folks to understand. We're looking at one referendum question. Again, we can't have building without the people, we can't have the people without the building. And that the referendum would ask for an increase in the debt certificate so that we can build the Eisenhower expansion, renovate and repair the siding, windows, doors, safety and security projects, and a $1.2 million operating cost. And as we look at estimating that out annually, that's about $485 on a $350,000 home. And help me explain the difference between, it's not your Zillow.
Yeah, it's not your Zillow rate or something that you would see on Realtor.com. It's actually the market value of your home as listed on your assessment, or listed on your tax bill.
And less
any
homestead or
exemptions
other
that
exemptions.
you may have, right.
But we put that out there again, a little bit of a higher estimate to know that there's absolutely important for us, for folks to understand what their investment is going toward and exactly what that might look like. Should this move forward and the board make a decision, we would actually put a tax calculator on the website so people can actually go in and enter all of their specific information and have a clearer picture of what that looks like before going to the voting booth. So, summarizing timeline and next steps, we're in the middle of what we're considering the community engagement phase. We've done some research over the last 6 months. We've done some investigations. We've worked with our architect and some of our other service providers to help us cost these things out and come up with some of these solutions. And now is the time that we want to share that information with the community. So between now and November, have been in the process of sharing this information. We did the one mailer, thank you. It made it to almost everyone. We have to look at it. Not all. We found at least one that didn't get it. We're doing a second mailer with more detailed information to be sent out in the next week or two. And then in November, we will have a survey, and that's a really important survey for us because it'll gather input from every resident, will be invited to participate and share their feedback. That's going to be information that will inform the board's decision in terms of whether or not to move forward with a referendum. It helps us to take a sort of the pulse of the community before we actually take any action. And so in December, that information will come back in. We have a presentation to the board on December 14th. We'll have an opportunity for community comment as well as board discussion. The last day for us to make that decision, if we want to move forward with a question in the ballot, if we want there to be a referendum in April, we have to put that on the ballot, finalize our decision by our January board meeting. So it'll be at that January board meeting that the board will have its final deliberation and make a determination whether to or not to move forward in terms of a ballot question. And if that ballot question is on the ballot, it would be for the April 4th election day. So that's a lot of information in hopefully not too much time. I want to thank our folks who are listening in or watching in at home, and I'm going to open up the floor for questions.